Hey friends, Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, back again with another video, and today I am setting up my bullet journal for May, and this month I decided to keep it really simple, just do one painting for the cover page, and then do everything else really minimalistic and practical. So the majority of this video will be working on this painting, and I hope you enjoy watching the process. This painting is inspired by a movie poster that I found on Pinterest that I thought was really cool looking, very moody and misty and foggy, diffused colors, and I found that really interesting. So I decided to try my hand at painting something similar, and it was definitely a challenge, and I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about the finished product, but that's kind of the fun thing about painting, especially as an amateur. You can just kind of try things, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and sometimes you're not really sure if it worked or not, but every time you're learning, and I find it interesting and relaxing no matter how it turns out in the end. I decided to work on the background first, starting from the lighter colors that I knew I was going to want in the painting, and then adding darker and darker layers as I went on. So I wanted to start with a wet canvas so I could get a nice washed out, diffused background. And I knew that the lightest areas in the center of the painting were going to be shades of yellow and orange. So I started with a light wash of yellow at the top, and then at the bottom, most of the elements were going to be shades of brown. So I started with a light wash of a very orangey, warm brown. And once that first layer was dry, I grabbed my circle template and just used a pencil to really lightly draw out a circle, and then went back in and erased as much as possible while still being able to see the general outline, because I knew I wanted to get as close to a perfect circle for the sun as possible. I also wanted it to be really large and sort of looming in the image. And I'm just using very watered down orange on my brush to outline that circle, and then to darken up the sky all the way around the sun, because the rest of the sky is going to be quite dark and moody and misty. You know, it's either the very end of the sunset or the very beginning of a sunrise, so the sky is still quite dark, but I wanted the sun to have a lot more lightness to it. So wanting to leave the center portion free of some of these layers that I'm building up to darken up the sky. Once I'd added another full layer, with the exception of that circle, I went in with some yellow to just fill the whole sun with some bright yellow as a good base. I did decide that I wanted the top to be a little bit lighter so I could have a bit of a gradient. So I grabbed some clean paper towel, wet it with clean water, and dabbed and wiped a little bit at this newly added pigment that was still a little bit wet, just to remove a little bit of the color. I also wanted to make sure to add a little bit of yellow and orange to the bottom half of the painting in the center, because there is going to be a river, and I wanted to make sure I got a little bit of reflection. So I want to add more yellow and orange just in the center portion. I do end up adding more later on, but I did want to lay the foundation for that reflection from early on. Today's video is very kindly sponsored by Brooklinen, my favorite sheets company on the planet. Y'all already know if you've been here for a while. I've been a huge fan of Brooklinen since I first tried their sheets over a year ago. They're all we use on our bed at this point. My husband and I love them, and every time we make the bed with a new set of sheets, whether it's the linen or the flannel or the percale, we fall in love all over again. If you're not familiar with them, Brooklinen is a luxury sheets company focused on creating home goods that will elevate your home. I firmly believe that one one of the most important places to invest in your home is in your bed. And your sheets are touching your skin for hopefully 8 hours a night, every single night. And investing in sheets that are high quality, last, and get softer with every single wash is so worth it in the end. I have definitely noticed an improvement in my sleep quality since switching over to Brooklinen sheets. Just being in sheets that are so comfortable, so soft, and help me regulate my temperature means that I fall asleep faster because I get in bed and I just burrow in. I feel so cozy and relaxed that I can drift off much easier than I ever could in cheap, uncomfortable sheets. Brooklinen is also a company that I trust. They have over 10,000 5-star reviews on their website, and I can say from personal experience because I have at least 5 full sets of Brooklinen sheets at this point, and every single set has only gotten better with every wash and every use. Brooklinen is actually celebrating their 10-year anniversary this month, which is so exciting. This time around, we decided to try Brooklinen's organic sheets, and we got the hardcore bundle, as always. Brooklinen bedding and bath products just became even more luxurious with the launch of their organic collection. Cool and crisp, their organic sheets feature a breathable 300 thread count weave for that timeless hotel-style luxury. Made in Portugal with 100% GOTS certified organic cotton. I hear these sheets are perfect for hot sleepers, which is amazing because that is definitely something I struggle with. I love a hardcore bundle because instead of buying individual pieces, you can save 25% by getting a bundle of a flat sheet, a fitted sheet, 4 pillowcases, and a duvet cover, and you can still mix and match between their 20 plus colors and patterns so you can really express your creativity. Y'all know I love color, so being able to switch it up, go from something really neutral, like my current mix-matched set of flannel and linen, all in a nice soft cream, to something brighter that pops, like a rust or mustard or even a fun pattern. I love constantly switching up my sheets and enjoying how it makes my bedroom feel completely different because your bed is such a great canvas to show your creativity in your room. I love that we're doing a bit of a tone-on-tone monochromatic look in here with the lighter green sheets and the dark green walls. Very much feeds into the Hobbit hole feel of this room, which is 100% what I'm going for. As with all of Brooklinen sheets, they're Oikotex certified, tested for harmful substances. They're safe for you and your family. So it's the next morning and my husband and I slept in our new organic sheets last night. They were so cozy. They're like the perfect combination between crisp sheets and soft, relaxed sheets. I don't know how Brooklinen has done it, but somehow these are both, and they're very cozy and comfortable to sleep in. Whether you're a longtime supporter of Brooklinen or this is your first time hearing about them, this is the perfect time to head over to Brooklinen and take advantage of their 10-year anniversary sale. 25% off site-wide, plus up to 45% off bundles until May 6th. It's the biggest sale of the year, so you don't want to miss out. Click the link in the description box and get you some Brooklinen sheets today. Thank you so much to Brooklinen for sponsoring this video. We're very excited about our new sheets. At this point, I realized I needed more orange in the sky, so I decided to add one more layer of orange through the entire sky, avoiding the sun itself. And once I finished that layer, just brushing with a relatively dry brush and just whatever leftover pigment was on it across the sun from around the midpoint down, so that I'm getting more and more of a gradient from almost white at the top of the sun through yellow into orange with a bit of a streaky look. I specifically wanted that streaky look because it made me think of videos I've seen of the sun rising or setting over the savanna in Africa, and that was kind of where my mind was going when I was painting this. I'm also starting to add up some darker layers for the bottom of the painting. So again, like I mentioned, there's going to be a winding river in the center, but either side, the banks of the river are going to be very, very dark. So I'm just slowly starting to add more and more brown to the sides, working one layer at a time to really darken this up. Once the sky portion of the painting was dry, I used a clean brush with clean water just to wet the area right before I started working on it, because I wanted to add some gray, smoky, misty clouds. So just wetting one specific spot and then immediately going in with a wet brush with some of my grayish brown pigment to add in the clouds. I changed my mind about adding a fourth cloud in the top here. I decided it was a little bit too much. It was covering too much of the sun. So I used some water and paper towel again to lift up that pigment before it fully dried, so I could kind of reset my sun. I decided to use that same brownish gray that I mixed to darken up essentially the entire sky. So I'm starting from the edges because I do want the edges to be the darkest areas of the sky and for them to fade a little bit as they approach the sun, so it looks more realistic, like the sun is brightening up the sky directly around it and then slowly its effect is fading as we get further out. I'm also adding another light layer of brown on the bottom half of the painting, and at this point I was starting to get a little impatient, I'm not gonna lie, with the light layers, and I decided to just go for it and start adding much darker brown to the bottom of the painting. So at this point, I'm really loosely blocking out where I want the banks of the river to be and where I want the river to be itself. I'm using a higher proportion of pigment and a lower proportion of water to get a darker, more opaque layer. I'm also adding another light layer of orange just to the center portion of the river. Again, later on I'm going to add even more because I really want this to look like the sun is reflecting in the water. And now that the sun is totally dry from my earlier removal of pigment, I'm just adding in a little bit more yellow yet again. At this point, it was time to add some greenery, so I mixed a very warm, muddy, sort of olive green to add in the greenery that's going to be right at the horizon line, and then also some areas of green further down near the foreground that are going to mix in with the brown of the banks of the river. I'm then going in to add an even darker layer to the foreground, so still using the same brown I mixed, but using far less water and far more pigment to get an even darker, even more opaque layer. Once my brush is almost entirely dry and free of pigment, I'm doing a dry brush from the bank of the river into the river, so I get a little bit more of a natural fade between the two. I decided there wasn't enough orange in general, so I'm adding a really light wash of orange to the sky around the sun and a little bit across the center of the sun, and then also across the center portion of the river. I felt like the foreground of this painting wasn't as misty and foggy as I wanted it to be, so I decided to wet some of the foreground on the left side and use a paper towel to lift up some of that pigment to get a little bit of that foggy, misty kind of look. At this point, I felt like I had a good base, so I decided to go in and add more detail to the greenery. So I'm using a very, very small brush with my green paint on it, and I'm adding just tiny little blobs, tiny little blobs here, tiny little blobs there, trying to keep them random so they look a little more natural. I also decided to add a couple little details to the foreground in brown, some little bits of grasses sticking up, some reflections of the grasses going the opposite direction, pointing down within the river, just to give a little bit more detail without getting too carried away. Once I was happy with those details, I decided to add one detail to the sky, and this was a flock of birds flying off towards the sun, flying into the distance. I looked up a couple photos of flocks of birds mid-flight so I could get some different positions for them to look natural, and then I just used the same brownish gray that I used for the clouds and my teeny tiny detail brush to paint these little birds. And that's the painting all finished. Now comes the hardest part of this whole video, I kid you not, which was trying to match the colors in the scanned version to the original version. And as you can see, even though I spent a very long time on it, it is still not totally accurate. Honestly, at this point, I blame my printer because it is never accurate with the colors. It never matches what's on my monitor, and no matter how I try to adjust my colors to try to accommodate how my printer decides to print things, it's still off every single time. It's very frustrating. So I eventually just gave up and decided this was close enough, even though it feels too red and pink leaning for my taste. Once I had the scan of my painting glued in, it was time to cut all my tabs. And in my B5 size notebook, I like to cut my tabs 2 by 2 on the diagonal and 4 tall on the straight side. That fits nicely in my B5 size journal, and I like to use tabs to easily flip between my weekly spreads and my monthly calendar, so that during the month while I'm planning and just using my bullet journal, it's really easy to navigate. Once I have my tabs cut, I decided to draw out my very simple calendar. Nothing fancy, like I said at the start of this video, the only art I'm doing for this is that cover page paintings. So everything else is very minimal, using one pen and my stamps. I did decide to paint the tabs using some of the colors I used in the painting, just to add that tiny bit of color to my weekly spreads. So I'm starting with the gray of the clouds, then brown, then getting into green, then yellow, then orange. And the last step here was just to set up my weekly spreads, and I'm still using my rolling weekly. It's working very well for me, so I'll link the video where I talk about the rolling weekly if you want to learn all about the system and why I use it and how to use it. I find it very practical, which is great because I've been super busy lately. And with that, we've come to the end of this setup. Like I said, other than the cover page painting, this is a very straightforward, simple setup, but I had a lot of fun with it. Again, this was a painting that I wasn't really sure how I was going to do it. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out or even what techniques I should be using to get the result that I wanted, but I had fun playing with it and trying things, and I feel like it turned out better than I expected it to, even though I still see areas that could be improved upon. I want to thank Brooklinen again for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to take advantage of their 10-year anniversary sale with the link in my description box. All items are 25% off site-wide and up to 45% off bundles through May 6th. It's their biggest sale of the year and you don't want to miss out, so click that link down below and shop their 10-year anniversary sale today. And with that, I'm going to get going. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.